Good afternoon. And what a great afternoon it is. It really is. It's been a spectacular day at the University of Louisville. We are so pleased to have the guest speakers, Ron Parker and Tim Ryan, with us. My job is to introduce my boss, so I'm going to say nice things. But first, I want to talk about the support that this event has. This is the inaugural Vince Tyra family speaker on leadership. And I said this earlier to a lunch, but I'm going to say it in the same way. When I came here, I was selected to be the dean. I thought, this is pretty good. I'm going to go out there and show people how to lead, how to ask questions, how to get people going, how to listen to people, motivate them, connect them to the things that they should be doing. And I hope I'm doing some of that, but I'll tell you what, a few months later, Vince Tyra came to campus, and he has shown us all what it means to connect people with purpose, to lead, to ask questions, to personify the values that a university should hold at its core about engagement with academics, with athletics, with the pursuit of excellence and the pursuit of ideas. And he has supported us in the College of Business with this leadership initiative, with his families. You know, the expression in advancement is we want people to contribute time, talent, and treasure. And he has reached into his family's personal wealth, treasure, to support us, and that's great. And we want that to be something that the university does with lots of its partners. But I will tell you unequivocally and as sincerely as I possibly can tell you that Vince Tyra has led us and helped me and helped the college and helped the university with his talent as a leader and with his values. We are now fully engaged with Adidas, with the athletic department. They share our values, we share their values, and it's just so terrific to be engaged. Vince, thank you for your support. Thank you very much. So now I get to introduce my president. And I will just say about President Neely, I should talk about her when I'm introducing her, right? But I'm going to talk about us. Isn't it great to have Neely Bendapudi here? Isn't it just terrific? We had a staff retreat, and one of the staff members came up and said, you know, everybody keeps talking about, oh, University of Louisville, we're really getting things going now, we're coming around the corner. He said, I don't get it, because I've been here 8 months, and all of it's been just like this. He said, that's somewhere in the history before I got here. And that's what it feels like now, isn't it? We're putting things way in the background, in the history, and we're oriented towards the future, and Neely is responsible for that optimism, the energy, and the terrific things that are going on at the University of Louisville. We are so pleased that you're here, Neely. I'll let you introduce our guests.
Thank you so much. Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. I hope you're excited and ready for this afternoon, for the panel discussion that's coming up, because I definitely am. How fortunate we are, how very, very fortunate we are. As you heard, I'm Neely Bendapudi, your new president. I can still say that because it's been 5 months since I took over. And from day one, I've been telling you that what we are going to be about at this university is a great place to learn for our students. To do that, we must be a great place to work for our incredible faculty and staff. And to do that, we need to be a place that's a great place to invest for everybody that cares about us. People need to be ready to make that investment because they know we'll be good stewards. And I also told you how we will differentiate ourselves. We will be a great place to learn, work, and invest because we celebrate diversity, because we foster equity, and because we strive for inclusion. And that's what will make us different. That's what will make us strong. So we've all talked about inclusive excellence. That's what we are about. And I'm not going to go through the litany with you, but just 2 weeks ago at my inauguration, I talked about values. We talked about both purpose and values. That's what you're going to hear. The purpose is to make sure that everybody at the UFL says, what is a big problem out there that I can tackle? And how can I use my talents and my focus and my energy, each of us asking ourselves, how do we make a difference in the world for other people? Next, we said, we do this with a set of core values, principles that guide us. And as you know, I talked about the cardinal principles. I'm a marketer, couldn't resist an acronym, right? So for us, before I introduce our panelists, we talked about we'd be a community of care. We're a community and we care. It's not just an individual, set of collection of individuals or buildings connected by an HVAC system, right? We're a community. We'll be accountable. We'll treat each other with respect, irrespective of our position. Even if we differ, especially if we differ, we're going to treat each other with respect. We talked about diversity and equity being part of our DNA. We talked about acting with integrity. We talked about a noble purpose, that higher education transforms lives. And the faculty and staff here who've been so committed to doing the right thing, no matter what happened, they need to be celebrated. We'll be agile, and we will all act as leaders, because we are. Leadership is an activity and not a position. So imagine for someone who's been talking about that, thinking about that, writing about that for years, and then today I get the chance to kick off this series. Thank you to Vince Tyra. I'm so proud of our faculty and staff, and Vince as our AD, as a member of my senior leadership team. I'm really grateful for the leadership shown here. But imagine my excitement at lunch when I got to sit by Tim Ryan, and I told them how exceptional it was for me to talk to him, because it turns out we know at least 3 people very well in common. And I told him, it really feels like I've known you forever. It really does. And once I explain why, you'll see. First of all, let me tell you why you are in for a treat. Tim Ryan is US Chairman and Senior Partner of PwC. In that role, he's responsible for leading the culture and setting the tone on the quality of the firm and its 52,000 employees and partners. He was previously Vice Chair and for Market Strategy and Stakeholders Leader at PwC. He's pretty visionary. I urge you to look him up online, some of the videos or some of his writing. They'll talk more about it, so I won't give it away. But when I say this is somebody who really believes in the strength of diversity and what happens when we bring all of the talents of a team together, it's no exaggeration. He really exemplifies this and what it means to be purpose-driven. The second individual that you will also hear from is Ron Parker. Ron is the former president and CEO of the Executive Leadership Council. It's an organization representing African American CEOs, senior executives, and corporate board members of Fortune 1000 and Global 500 companies. It is so vital. But again, this is someone who is visionary, no question, because Ron is probably most noted for the creation of the Next Gen CEO Academy that's powered by Deloitte. I guess I can say that name, right? The creation of the C-Suite Academy that was developed in partnership with McKinsey, and for guiding the corporate board initiative. All of these, I think, speak to how he has repurposed his time after stepping away from 30 years at PepsiCo as Senior Vice President of Human Resources, Labor Relations, and Global Diversity and Inclusion. Before I bring them up on the stage, so 2 exceptional individuals, and you'll get to see what they're doing. There's so much we can learn from them as the UFL. Let's be a university that says we're all in. We care about this, we're on the same path, let's partner, help us. We have no ego here, we want that help. But before we do, let me give a quick shout out to our moderator today, Nat Irvin. Many of you who've been in the community know Professor Irvin pretty well. I can tell you that there's not a program I hear about and I say, that's fantastic. Who thought of this? Nat Irvin. Something else, oh, that's a really cool idea. Who does that? Nat Irvin. So I don't know whether he has clones or what the deal is. I asked him to tell me something unique about him that I could say, and he said, just tell them I love U of L as much as you do, because I love this university, and I want to make sure that we get it to rise to the great heights it can. I also want to give a shout out to Loria and Robinson. Nat Irvin says she's been responsible for all of the details. I might have to leave at the Q&A. I changed my board meeting call. You never usually do that. But today I called and said, I have to listen to this. So that's why I'm doing the thank you now. Could we have a round of applause for Lorian and Nat, Tim Ryan, Ron Parker, come on up here. And I mean this, and I don't say this lightly. Today I needed this conversation with them. They are inspirational. They are so thoughtful. Ask questions. That's the thing. Okay, make the most of this time.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ron.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure.
It's my pleasure.
Thank you, Nat. Thank you very much.
So much. Well, what a wonderful introduction by our president and opening comments by our dean. And thank you all so much for being here. And I'm delighted to be able to share this stage with these two really wonderful visionaries on behalf of the College of Business and University of Louisville. And what I thought we'd start with, Tim, as we talk about leadership, the future of leadership, Ron, and thinking about purpose and values and how we might lead. Two stories, one from each one of you. And I thought maybe we would anchor our conversation before we talk about the CEO action statement and talk about trust leadership, something that both of you have espoused, and talk about how you prepare your teams for leadership. But tell me a little bit about what two jobs have you had? And I thought, and Ron, you can speak to this as well, but something that has prepared you in terms of the values that you ultimately would have, how did they come to you?
Yep. So I tell people I've had two jobs in my career. I've been at PwC for 30 years, and I had a supermarket job for 10 years. I love them both. At the supermarket for 10 years, I learned an awful lot of lessons from management. And the reason I share this story is you're not always sure where lessons are going to come from. And I shared one lesson earlier on. I'll share another lesson I learned at the supermarket. When I was 18 years old, I was a senior in high school. I just finished my senior year. And I was getting ready to go to college, and I was in the back room shucking lettuce with two of my buddies. And there was a boy at the supermarket who was slow. He just didn't move at the pace we did. He had some mental disabilities. And myself and my two buddies were making fun of him. His name was Larry. And I was kind of leading the ring band and making fun of him. And the store manager, a guy named Richie Ordway, who just recently passed, he stopped by and he pointed at me and he goes, knock it off. He said, Larry is giving you 100% of what he can give you. What more do you want? I learned more about people and leadership in that lesson that Richie taught me than I ever learned in college. And that shaped who I am. It helped me understand that leadership is not about making everybody like you. It's about creating environments where people can give 100% of what they can give.
Thank you. Yeah. Ron.
Well, I would say, first of all, thank you. Thank you to University of Louisville for inviting Tim and I here. And thank you, Nat. Let me just, a small story here before I respond to your question. Dr. Irvin is the strategic advisor to the Executive Leadership Council, an organization that I had the pleasure of running for 6 years as the president and CEO. I've been a member for almost 25 years. Tim and his wonderful organization has supported us for the last 12 to 15 years in a CEO summit, which I think has helped to lead up to what Tim's going to talk about a little bit later about the CEO action. But I must say that I am who I am because of the last two experiences that I've had, one being an officer with PepsiCo, where I worked for 30 years. And the reason I will cite that is because being a black professional, when I was approached by Steve Reineman, our CEO and chairman at PepsiCo at the time, I did not want the global diversity job. I was running all of North America, and I felt that that was the new metric by which I should be seen. And being a black professional, I didn't want that to be my legacy. But I had a good friend named Vernon Jordan who called me. I know he's a good friend of Tim as well. Now, if you know anything about Vernon Jordan. Vernon Jordan never served in any presidential administration. And when he called me, he told me this, and again, I share this with you because I learned from sound bites and from visual capturing of images. He said, Ron, I'm going to tell you this once. It's not what you control, but what you influence. So I repeated that. So Mr. Jordan, I call him Mr. Jordan. So it's not what you control, what do you influence? He said, yes. And the reason he was saying that to me, he said, you're sitting at the right hand of a CEO. And that CEO, if they're good, will listen to the things that you have to say. You will become a data point. Therefore, the metric you're using about being the head of the North America business is the wrong metric. It's about people who have power to make things happen. So that's what he said to me. The second job, Nat, that I have cherished is the most recent one at EOC, because it has taken those 30 years of PepsiCo to allow me to realize that I have so much more to give to society for those CEOs who are still in their jobs, being advised by wise counsel from you, is that I can influence things from that vantage point through their organizations because they have such a broad reach. So those are the two jobs that really have made an impression upon me, that at this point in time, being tall, dark, and handsome, it's not about me anymore. And I love the president. It's about the next generation of leaders, and I know Tim feels the same way. So it's really helped me define my purpose as a leader.
Excellent. Well, let's talk about how you two came together on what brings us here today in this national issue. Tim, I guess it's July 2016?
Yep.
And you get to be, how did you get selected as senior partner, chair, that whole thing?
So at PwC, we're a partnership of about 3,500, and it's one partner, one vote. I tell people we're like the United States, except a little more collegial. So I was privileged to be elected by my partners in April of 2016 to begin a term serving July 1, 2016. And I think as you know, and just for the group, like any incoming CEO, or we call it chairman and senior partner, I had a plan. And you have to trust me, it was a good 100-day plan. It was unique because it talked about growing sales and revenue. It talked about serving our clients better. It talked about the bottom line. And God, I thought it was a really good plan. I really did.
I love it.
Yep. And 4 days in, it seemed like a good plan. And then my first week as senior partner, that Friday morning, we woke up to shootings in Dallas and violence in Dallas. And that was off the heels of Minnesota and Louisville and Louisiana. And there were...
This is the whole Black Lives Matter.
Yeah, and I was, never forget, I was in New York City at the time. I got my team on the phone and in the room, and we talked about what do you do? And all of a sudden, that 100-day plan didn't seem to matter that much. And Ron, it's one of your point that from Vernon Jordan, we started to get data points. And what we heard from our people all over the country in response to a relatively benign email that I sent out an email that Friday mid-morning saying, look, something bad clearly happened. I know it's on your minds. And I know you're hurting, and we'll figure this out together. What came in were hundreds and hundreds of data points, like data points, and just listening. And what we heard from our people is they were coming to work, and they didn't know how to behave. They didn't know what to share. And I realized we had been recognized by outside organizations for being good at diversity, and my two predecessors had diversity high on their agenda, and the firm had made good progress. But if we were that good, people were coming to work and couldn't talk about how they felt. And how are we ever going to grow an organization and be successful if people can't talk about how they feel? And so that for me was a major data point. After listening to those data points, it became clear, despite a decade of investing in diversity and inclusion with programs and awards and rewards, we had missed what I call the foundation. And the foundation was we hadn't created a culture where people could talk about how they really feel. And that's when I really became partnered with Ron, and we talked about, like, kind of what do you do? And the first thing that we did was we decided that on July 21st of 2016, which for a large organization with 50,000 people was very quick, we decided to have our first day ever discussion about race. Which, if you think about the country's emotions at that point in time, it was very, very raw. And we said, look, we're going to have discussions, and we didn't put in rules, we didn't put in requirements, we just asked all over the country our people to talk about how they feel. In those intervening weeks between when we decided we were going to do it and we did it, I was with a Fortune 50 CEO, and I had shared with them.
I was wanting to hear this.
I shared with them, I said we were going to do this. And he was a good friend, but he pointed across, I hate to point, but he said, "You're effing crazy. Like, that's gonna blow up in your face." And like, we knew it was a risk, and particularly for an incoming CEO, it was risky, but I felt it needed to be done. And there were enough data points and listening to those people trying to influence that you needed to try it. And it was a huge success. Somebody said to me, we shed more tears as a firm on July 21, 2016 than we did in 160 years of our existence. And we began to learn from each other. And I did the session in Atlanta that day. We learned what it was like to be a black professional who was teaching their young children how to get pulled over, which to most of our white professionals was completely foreign. We learned what it was like to be a father and cry when he had a son instead of a daughter, because of what that meant to that young child's safety as they grew up, which our young professionals had no idea. Our white professionals had no idea. And we learned stories amongst one another. Later on that week, I did one in New York, and one of our black professionals, who was impeccably dressed, way better than I dress, like way better, and he, in the meeting, took his jacket off. He took his shirt off, and he pulled out his baseball hat. And he goes, "When I have this suit on, I feel safe in the New York office. When I take my jacket off, I take my shirt off, and I have my tee and my lid on, and I go to the softball game in Central Park, I feel unsafe walking down our corridors because I'm being judged and people are afraid of me." We would never understand that if we didn't create a culture of understanding. And on that day, we began that process of understanding. And I'll be candid, I thought I could breathe, like, because we had a successful day. And some of our black professionals asked me, "What's your role outside of PwC?" And I was like, whoa, I kind of be enough. And I was like, it really got me thinking. And I spent the better part of August thinking. We talked, and that led us to begin to kick around what was CEO Action.
Then
he's
you
being
go
modest.
ahead. Yeah,
he's being
go ahead.
modest.
Yeah.
In the world of the private sector, CEOs would not even venture close to having and doing what he did without having putting what we call points on the board. For those of you athletes, you don't strut and do your thing until you've done something, right? Otherwise, you just, it may turn against you. Nat, he had no points on the board. It was Tim Zero organization, to be determined. But Dr. Nelly, just like you and what you've done, he decided from his core values, this is something I have to do. But when his associate says, "So what are you going to do
Next.
outside?" Next. Now that's the fundamental question. That's what becomes fun.
So now let's do that. So how did you help Tim? I know a little bit about this, but I think it would be good for the audience to talk a little bit about how you two came together, ELC, PwC. How did you work together to help establish a framework of how you might do this? Because I'm assuming, Tim, that someone inside your organization said, "I'm not so sure about this." You've got a lot of dynamics going on here.
Right.
Well, as you well know, you were there, Nat. We, at the ELC, each year, sponsored by PwC, we do a CEO summit. And we gave Tim a platform to talk about what he had experienced inside of PwC in a closed door session with other CEOs. There had to be about 30 CEOs in the room. And he framed out what he was about to do.
Thinking and feeling.
Thinking about the CEO Action, and really tested gave him the opportunity to kind of test the thinking and the model of what we were going to do going forward. And it was around November timeframe when he did that. And within the next month, Tim had already solicited some other members of the steering committee, and we had started our outreach to other CEOs to sign the manifesto of doing the 3 things that are in the CEO action.
So before we talk about that, so what you were saying is that you created, the 2 of you created with ELC, PwC, a sort of an environment where, because there were CEOs there from Fortune 50 companies, black, white, but a space where you could have conversations about this difficult topic of diversity and inclusion, race, the way we look at it in America, what we weren't talking about. Why was that important, Tim?
Yeah, so one of the things that we did, maybe even going to September and October 1st, so like many of you, and I've had the privilege today to talk to a number of students, and a few of you have said, I see a problem, what do I do? And that's good, first of all. I commend the optimism of seeing a problem and finding something to do. We allowed ourselves, I call it time to wander or go down cul-de-sacs. So spend time, and one of the things I learned early in my career is it's okay to brainstorm and let yourself wander a bit before you land on the right answer and get views and different ideas. And we spent a lot of time in September and October going down dead ends and cul-de-sacs. And ultimately what we decided was we didn't want to just pull together the same old companies, the ones who get it. And the ones who get it. What we wanted to do was leverage our platform and our influence to pull many along. And so that was a big strategic decision. We could have gotten the same group together that are part of the ELC, the ones who give their time, their money, have a track record, but we felt we wouldn't have accomplished anything. And I would argue we chose the road less traveled. We chose the one to go with what I call critical mass, or a lot of CEOs. And the idea is that diversity and inclusion is not competitive. So Nellie, when you say Deloitte, that's okay. Like, what we did is we wanted to pull everybody along because we shouldn't be competing on diversity and inclusion, because it's the biggest social opportunity we have in front of us. It's the biggest business opportunity we have in front of us, and it's the biggest opportunity we have to help others realize their full potential. So we kind of then landed on this foundation. We were going to pull many along. So the first thing that I did is I called the CEOs of Deloitte, KPMG, EY, BCG, and Accenture. And I got his help in doing that. And we asked them to join us, and they did. Ron helped. We got Pepsi and Coke. We got United Airlines, Delta Airlines, and American Airlines. We got Huntington Bank and Key Bank. We got competitors to come together and say we can all do better, because when we all do better, society's going to do better. So we made a strategic decision to widen the net. And the whole idea, we recognize, and literally I talked to hundreds of CEOs, many would say, well, I'm at a certain point in the journey. I'm too far behind to join, or I'm too far ahead to be part of the group. What we tried to do is create this pool where by sharing, we would pull each other along. And in some cases, we'd share our capital, our intellectual property, and other cases would take, but there'd be different times during the journey.
But he made it very difficult, Nat, if I may, for several of the black CEOs who are part of the ELC.
This is an interesting dynamic.
Very interesting dynamic, because
You would think the white guys would be the ones who would be reluctant to kind of go along.
And you're absolutely right. And basically, with several of the black CEOs, they were saying to me, Ron, we've seen this movie before. We got all this enthusiasm. There's some things that have happened in the marketplace. But what pressures we were getting as a professional black organization comprised of black CEOs, and what was happening in the communities with some of these unfortunate situations, we were being asked, what are you guys going to say about this? When are you going to step up to the mic? This newly minted CEO, Tim Ryan, has grabbed the mic and he is running with it. The question is, ELC, what are you going to do about it? Yeah. So he really gave me no choice but to hook up with this. And he and I were still getting to know each other. I said, but this is where I have to trust his instincts, that the moment of opportunity and the window of opportunity when the external world has been crying out for leadership
From the private sector.
from the private sector, because we will say our jobs are to drive shareholder value, to drive our market share, to drive the profitability of our companies, and not get caught up in what's happening with some of these social issues. Tim basically, and these other members of the steering committee that he had brought on board, saying, no, it's our time. It's our time to let people know who we are, what we stand for, what's important, the cultures that we have, that we've created in our respective organizations. And with Tim's help, with Ken Chenault, then Ken Frazier, then Bernard Tyson, then Ursula Burns, other members of the EOC, and we have been joined at the hip now for almost 2 years.
So you started off, Tim, with how many companies?
So so a little bit of story how we got there. So we spent the fall, winter of 2016, and then the spring of 2017 asking companies. And as you can imagine, this was an entrepreneurial effort. Like so in the normal course of business, I meet with CEOs on a regular basis, many a week, and Ron, you have a complete network as well. And just every meeting we started going through the concept. And it was natural that diversity would come up because you may recall our country was now going through an election at that point in time. So it came up quite a bit just in the normal course of business. And at the end of every meeting, I'd make the ask. And as you can imagine, in the early days, there was a little bit of, hey, that sounds good, but I'm not sure I want to put my brand at risk. It may not be a safe time. Or give me back, who else is in? If I had $1 for every time I said, so who else is in? If they join, have they joined? So, we grinded it out. We grinded it out, and we believed in it. We pivoted a bit. At first, there was a concern. There was too much focus on blacks. And so we listened and we talked, and this is the data points again, and we broadened it to all underrepresented groups. Now, I think we both believe very clearly the gap on blacks is bigger than every other gap, and as I say in my firm, a little side note, every underrepresented group is important. Now, but we also need to be honest with each other. The gap on blacks is way too wide, relative, way too. So, but we pivoted. And then by the grace of God, in April of 2017, it went like this. Like we finally got our break, and we went from 15 and 20 companies to 50 and 60. And the experts told us that if we got 50, it would be a huge success. We launched on June 12th with 112 companies, and that was beyond everybody's expectations in terms of what we had. But we were only just beginning, even then.
And where are you now?
So, at our year anniversary, which is June 12th on 2018, that we just celebrated, we're now at 550 companies. And what has been amazing is just the momentum. The momentum. In the first year, we ended up getting 550 CEOs, and maybe a little bit of color as to why we chose CEO Action. And we had the help of Ron.
Talk a little bit about the details.
And also, I'd be remiss if I didn't call out David Taylor of Procter & Gamble, who was an incredible thought partner and put his resources. So it wasn't just the ELC's resources, but also PwC's and Procter & Gamble's. What he dedicated was his marketing resources. And what you may not know about Procter & Gamble is the largest marketing budget in the world.
Huge commitment.
And they helped us land on all the branding on the site. So you'll see no ELC branding, no PwC branding, and no Procter & Gamble branding, because we wanted to be the community CEOs. We chose CEO because we wanted to go after the top. It was very deliberate. We chose CEO because CEOs can do remarkable things. They can M&A, they can restructure balance sheets, recover from financial crisis, they can lobby in Washington. We wanted to send the message, we can get this done. And this old kind of story, it's a journey. Like, if a CEO went to their board with M&A is a journey, it's a journey. Like that's crazy, right? We restructure our balance sheet, it's a journey. Like that. So we chose CEO very deliberately, because they can get stuff done. We also chose Action because we felt it was time for action as opposed to words. So that, and we landed, we knew what we wanted to say, but we couldn't put in the right words. Procter & Gamble helped us get the right words very quickly, and we landed on CEO action, and that was very deliberate. So in the first year, the actions that we took is we drove membership from 112 to 550. We also broadened it to higher ed. So deliberately we chose corporate America first because we wanted to get the corporate world to lead. And frankly, we knew higher ed would be an easier sell. Like higher ed sees the cold face of it. So we chose corporate America, but in year one, we broadened it to higher ed. The second thing that we did is we had the largest CEO summit on diversity and inclusion that we are aware of. And we had 72 CEOs in November come to New York City, closed door session to talk about what they're really afraid of. And having been in that session, what you heard, frankly, is the real conversation. Well, I'm afraid if I do it, how do you balance, Tim, not getting the majority mad? How do you balance when you have to come down to give two people an opportunity, and you've got one white guy who's been working the whole time, and you explain to them, you're going to choose, when you get two equal candidates, you're going to choose this person who's equally qualified, yet you also want this person to still lead. We had like the real conversations, issues. the real issues that CEOs, human beings just like anybody else, how do they deal with those issues? In January, thanks to Ken Frazier at Merck, we hosted the largest ever gathering of chief human resource officers and chief diversity officers, 220. So think about that connected community. All these people have the ear of the CEO who then could share, here's what I struggle with, or here's what works with my CEO. And then what I'm most proud of is in year one, we ended up with over 500 best practices on the site. And here's where you get to the social benefit of CEO action. So we know America moves on small business. We know that the engine of growth in America is small businesses starting and growing. We don't need small businesses to recreate the wheel here. And in the United States, on women alone, we spend $8 billion a year on diversity and inclusion, $8 billion. That's skewed very heavily to the large corporates. So what we did is we said we want to democratize the best practices out there on diversity and inclusion. So on the site, we have over 500 best practices. And if you are a 100-person shop on the south side of Chicago, a 10-person shop on the west side of Louisville, a 1,000-person shop in Plano, Texas, and you want to know how to put in recruiting practices or promoting practices, if you want to see unconscious bias training, but not spend all the money to develop it, it's all on the site. And it doesn't matter whether it came from Deloitte or PwC or Accenture or Pepsi, it's all out there. And we're trying to rise the tide for everybody, and that's what we got to in year one.
But it moves, though, Nat, from what we have somewhat been characterized as a private sector, especially around some of these topics around diversity and inclusion, is from rhetoric to action.
Yeah.
And I rely upon sound bites. Ruth Simmons, Dr. Simmons, who was president of Brown University, I think she's an HBCU president down in Prairie View, A&M. She once said to me, leadership is the art of the conversation. Now, going back to Tim's initial gathering within PwC, is not only what was discussed, but how it was discussed. The mere fact that those 50,000 employees felt that they were on the same level as their CEO to express their eagerness, their fears, their concerns, their trust or mistrust of any system that's out there, to have a respectful conversation about it created a whole new dynamic within those companies who have signed on to the manifesto, just by having the sheer conversation about what was happening in the public domain.
Well, what you mentioned the word trust, which I know has been a word that both of you have used, and I think that if we can explore this next subject regarding leadership, and that is trust-based leadership. Tim, would you talk a little bit about how do you employ trust-based leadership and why in your organization? And Ron, you can speak to that as well.
So a quick story, first of all. When I was a young consultant growing up in the firm, I was working, the client was a bank and it had a mortgage operation. And the assignment was to help the company accelerate the number of days it takes to close a loan. So they were trying to go from 65 days to 33 days. And I was a young consultant. I'm wandering the floors of the bank. I'm trying to figure out what to do. And I bump into a woman who had been there for 20 years. And she goes, "Come over here." And I sat down and she goes, "You're trying to figure out how to cut out 30 days? I said, "Yeah." She goes, "I'll tell you the answer." And she sat down and she literally mapped out where all the inefficiencies were. And what I learned was 80% of leadership is just listening. And people will tell you the answers if you let them. And 20% is taking all these different data points and collating them and having the courage to make a decision. So when I had become senior partner, literally the first thing I did the first day was I changed the dress code to jeans. Now, then to the West Coast part of our firm, no big deal.
Right.
But in New York, they had heart attacks and strokes, right? But the reason I did it, all joking aside, the very conscious reason I did it was because I wanted to show our people that I trusted them. And my legal function and my human capital function literally tried to rewrite the email 4 times. And they wanted to explain what type of jeans, what type of shoes you could wear with the jeans, what type of shirt. And this is the truth. And what I said to our team, no, like this is very deliberate, that this actually wasn't the 100-day plan. Our people are the ones closest to the client. They're closest to the schools we partner with. They're closest to the communities. We have to trust them. And by the way, and this goes to your fail fast point, if we make a mistake, we're not going out of business. And it was a very subtle point to say, I trust you. And from there, we've begun to build, which is why I had confidence in that July 21st discussion. That's what I was thinking. Because I trusted our people. And I learned that early in my career. If you trust people, most people wake up in the morning want to do the right things. And if they make a mistake, we'll survive. Hell, we survived the Oscars. We handed out the wrong envelope.
We'll come back to that too.
But the point is, if you trust people, it's going to be okay. So I'm a big believer in that.
Ron?
For me, again, being tall, dark, and handsome, and very confident in oneself, especially being an athlete, I mean, you have to survive.
You played tight end.
Played tight end with the Bears for a brief period of time. But I think with women and people of color, we have to start on the trust journey by being vulnerable, by letting people in. I would say to you, during my 30 years, the first couple of years inside the organization, I hid behind the imposter syndrome because I felt that the organization, if they got a glance into, me and all of the the biases that are associated with, number one, athletes and being where they may be on the intellectual scale. So basically, I used to tell people I was a swimmer as opposed to football. Just a joke there, see if you guys will laugh. But I found that the trust level would accelerate if I allowed for a little bit of vulnerability. Meaning that I was willing to share things during my life's journey and things that I was good at and things that I was not so good at. And that the organization was willing to then reciprocate by saying, you know what, I too have some warts. And when that happens, that's a whole new rebirth of a relationship that starts to be built on authenticity. That is something to really experience. And it's intoxicating once you achieve it.
The authenticity?
The authenticity, because what happens is you see 2 individuals or you see a system that is based on trust, because I think trust can be extended beyond individuals into a culture. It just flourishes and you see the productivity and all of the uniqueness of that entity on full display when you reach that level of trust.
Well, that leads us then to talk about culture. That's something that's been very important to your work, Tim, very important to your work, Ron. You just spoke about it. Would you talk about that in the context of leading, and how do you create the kind of culture that allows you to have the vulnerability that Ron spoke of, especially when we're talking about matters of race, ethnicity? We'll get to technology in just a minute, but just the notion of, talk about culture. How do you create it? How do you sustain it? How do you change it?
Yeah. So, Ron, you had talked earlier about how you learn, and so I thought that was very helpful. And I learn through observing and participating personally. So I read.
Observing and participating.
Yeah, and I read a lot, but my best learning experiences are in the moment and learning. And throughout my career, I've been involved with two major cultural transformations. One at a large client that I worked with in my career, and one at the firm when I was running the audit business. What I learned is that cultural change takes 3 to 5 years. You can't rush it. Like if you rush it, you will get a sugar high, but you won't get it. And I learned that true cultural change takes 3 to 5 years. And it's a journey that when you go on it, on that journey, it will never be like this. It will be like this. And you need to be prepared for that, and you need to be realistic. And a cultural change or developing a culture, you need to have a target. You need to know where you want to get to. And for me, the culture around diversity and inclusion is, I want a place where people are truly safe, talking about how they feel without retribution, and being able to do it real time. We're not there yet. To be clear, we're on the journey.
Yeah.
I can assure you, but we're not there yet, and we're making very clear, measurable progress. But it also takes the right supporting mechanisms in place. And said differently, the plumbing in the organization needs to be aligned. So I've seen many organizations, and there's been times at PwC where you have a vision, but the plumbing is not aligned with that. So what do I mean by plumbing? What it means is my messaging, where I spend my time, how I spend my time, when I write to our employees, when I speak to our employees. That's one element of it. But it's not just me. It's then my leadership team. Are they living those behaviors? It's our evaluation system, our promotion system. So it shouldn't be a surprise. At PwC, in order to get promoted at every level, you have to have taken our unconscious bias training. And we chose that very deliberately. It's not a compliance requirement where you must do it. If you want to get promoted and lead people, you must take it, and at each level. And that's a balancing act because we're rewarding leadership. That's an example where the plumbing needs to be in place. And yes, our accountability. When somebody is not living those behaviors, holding them accountable. And yes, there's measurement along the way. And so every step along that journey is important, but for us, it's about a clear defined definition, and then the plumbing, which is the underlying activities within the organization, have to align to it.
Well, doesn't that require, and I'll come right to you, Ron, but Tim, doesn't it require that sometimes CEO, the manager, the leader is going to have really tough conversations? What happens when, somebody doesn't measure up? Yeah. And they're using the wrong language, or how do you? It seems to me there will be times when you would have to deliver gentle nudges, maybe direct nudges, when you're trying to change the culture.
All the time.
When people don't make the transition.
All the time.
All the time.
And so I again, completely candid. There are times where I will share with those close to me, and not looking for sympathy because you choose to lead. It's exhausting, kind of telling people what they could have done differently, and doing it in a way where you don't, undress them or undermine them. It's actually easier, believe it or not, it's actually easier just to be a jerk. It's actually hard to really teach people, right? And that's exhausting. It is literally exhausting. And I'll actually give you a real example of something that I haven't talked publicly about, but I have spent hundreds and hundreds of hours over the last 2 years in our talent development system, particularly around our underrepresented minorities. We always had a talent development system in place, but at a personal level. So again, where you spend your time. And when I was looking at the most recent output about a month ago, there were a handful of individuals that I or the team had come to know that didn't come out where I thought they were. And so recognizing you got 3 layers of process that had come up with that answer, and I had been involved for hundreds of hours. And I had 2 choices. I had a choice to trust the system's answer, or I had a choice to challenge it, and then how would I challenge it? And I challenged it. I actually went to my team, and I said, look, I can go ask these questions, in which case I'm afraid they'll just move the people into the spot I thought that you mean, but ultimately they'll translate it because Tim said so, as opposed to pointing out what I saw. And I saw an underrepresented person, a black person, who in my judgment had all the skills, but they were tagged with, well, I just want to see them do a little bit more business development. And my judgment was everybody needs that, so I thought we were setting the bar in the wrong place, a subjective assessment. Or what I did instead was I spent time with the two leaders at the two layers, and I asked them to go ask the questions. And I helped them understand that maybe we were looking at this a little bit differently. That just took more time. It just took more time. Frankly, it would have been a lot easier for me to call the person and say, I think she should be in this bucket, and move on. But that's an example of where you spend your time, but more importantly, how do you do it? I helped them, in my judgment, see that they had an uneven bar that needed to be set.
Ron, you want to come?
I would underscore everything Tim just expressed. And you know this, Nat, having spent as much time as you have with me. I think cultural shifts take place when you really analyze and you're willing to give up some aspects of power. At the end of the day, power is a dynamic that occurs that creates a culture. And when you really want to do cultural transformation, you must be willing to speak truth to power, which he did with those two leaders, and to be willing to give up some aspect of that power to other colleagues or other dynamics that you're looking to disrupt. When power is held at the center, and to me, great leaders are willing to recognize that it's being held there, and who have enough courage to say, I'm going to disperse and empower. Because when you empower, you maximize the potential of the entire organization. The data points that are out there says that most organizations, from a productivity standpoint, only gets about 35% worth of engagement of their employee base. Now just imagine, without hiring any other person here at the University of Louisville, and you disperse that power and empower departments, students, whatever structure you have, and you ramp that up by 20%, look out. There's no other institution or university, or even within yourselves, if you realize that, you know what, I'm a control freak, everything has to be perfect, but wait a minute, what are you doing to the people around you? You're disempowering them, therefore impeding their ability to learn.
Amen.
And so with that being said, I think you start to transform power cultures when you're really willing to let go of some of the power and fail, but you learn from it and you move to a higher regard.
We only have a few minutes left, and I think that the last area I'd like to cover with both of you gentlemen is looking at the future. And that is, how do you take your teams? Tim, I think you had 40 people when you selected your team. What did you do with them, and why did you do it? And I have obviously some knowledge about it, but I thought it would be important because both of you have done something similar. And that is, I'm thinking about, here we are at a university. We have obviously representatives from the corporate community. We have different mid-level managers, but building teams. But how do you build a team for the future, and what was your strategy?
So I mentioned earlier, my two predecessors had been serious about diversity, inclusion, and succession planning for over a decade. When I was elected senior partner, one of the unique abilities you get is you get the ability to choose your team. And I didn't miss that opportunity. Fortunately, because of my predecessors, I had a wonderful pool of talent to choose from. And I was, first of all, very conscious of the fact that I needed a great team for the amount of work that we wanted to do at the firm, not just on D&I, but technology and everything else. And secondly, I was very fortunate to have a great pool. And so when I chose my team, I wanted to be very careful to make sure people looked up and saw people they could look at, and not just today, but where we want to go, recognizing what was happening with demographics. So I'm very proud to tell you, my team is, if not the most, one of the most diverse teams in corporate America, in the power positions, The head of our advisory business is a black man. The head of our tax business is a black man. The head of our audit business is a Latino woman. So our power positions, in addition to other positions, are very diverse. That has allowed me to benefit greatly from their thinking, and to Ron's point, trust them and to help advise me. But then after that, what we've been doing is we have been providing more transparency. And this gets to the trust. And a couple of my partners are in the audience, and they can vouch for this. We have annual partner meetings. We have consistently, in each of the last 3 years, provided more transparency around what we really look like, our data, which one of the things that is important, and if you're in the corporate world, you'll know this, there's an incredible amount of data around pay gaps, ratings gaps, promotion gaps. We trusted our partners to share that data so they could see what we see. They could see it. I shot a video with 3 of our black professionals because every office I go to, I'll meet with our minorities. And I finally got to the point where I said, I need to share what I'm hearing. Like it's good that I'm hearing it, but you want to share it at scale. And we shot a video with 3 of our black professionals, and we showed that with our partners. We actually took them through a gamified experience that allowed them to see the data and see what it matters to people who start at the firm of different race and gender and whatnot. But I've trusted our team to see that data because I believe that once they see the data, they'll act differently. And just one of the partner meetings ended this way. It was completely unscripted. One of our partners stood up, picture room of 1,000 partners. He stood up and he said, Tim, thank you for CEO Action. Thank you for what you're doing. He goes, do you think the 3,500 partners are with you? These are the people who vote me in.
Tough question.
And I said, here's what I said. I said, I got to tell you, on the D&I push, I honestly don't know.
Yeah.
But here's what I know. What I believe is that my 3,500 partners care. And I believe that if they can see what I have had the privilege of seeing, that they will care and do the right thing. And that was completely unscripted, and that is what I believe. I believe that when people see, and we all see the inequities, they will all act differently, because I believe at the heart most people care. And so for me, it's about exposing the team to more data, because then you count on their innate instinct to lead.
Exactly.
Ron?
Well, for me, Nat, it starts with the 2 questions that you posed to my board when we had our strategic retreat. Just to give you a sense, the ELC is an organization, like I said, it's made up of these high-powered black executives who are at Tim's level, and in basically, when you have reached a certain point in your career, you think you are all that and more. And it has a factor of 10 when you're black and you're a CEO or you're a C-suite, basically you've amassed certain things and you've been given the secret keys to the castle. So you start to believe you're all that and more. So imagine I have to manage that kind of attitude. But I had Dr. Irvin to come out during our board retreat, and my first strategic meeting, we acknowledged the past, and we titled that particular meeting "Going from Good to Great," so we could be better than what we were. But this was the second strategic planning meeting. So we assembled our team, and I had Dr. Irvin to ask 2 fundamental questions to the team and to myself. First question was, are we relevant today? Now think about it. Now it's nothing more demoralizing to have your kids come to you. I have 3 adult kids, and to tell me, Dad, you are irrelevant. After you've paid for college education, finance maybe a townhouse or 2 or a couple of cars, okay? And to tell you you are irrelevant. Now, in a very nice way, but it may be something attributed to my model of cell phone or whatever, or the music genre that I listen to. But Nat asked that question of this organization, are you relevant today? By asking that question, we hit the pause button. But the second question that he asked us, which for our team, is what will make you relevant tomorrow? Now that really shifted that entire team, and you were there, to think about what we were doing today, and really, does it mean a hill of beans, given how fast the world changes? But the challenge was, I can be relevant if I look into tomorrow, if I brace the unknown, and this gets back to diversity and inclusion. What we're seeing, the transformation, Nat, in people who are at a much higher regard and appreciation for diversity and inclusion, is to have the courage to step into the unknown, to do something that they've never done, to experience something, or to interact with someone they may have limited experience with. I mean, one of the first questions I asked Tim when he started with this crazy idea, I said, help me to understand, how does a white guy, blue-eyed, blonde hair from Boston, with no points on the board, you want to play in this game? Because this game could be a very slippery slope if we don't get it right. That's just being honest with him. Mm-hmm. So the whole idea is that, especially within cultures of color, we have a tendency not to ask ourselves sometimes the hard questions. Mm-hmm. And we really have an issue with what I call the gift of feedback. Mm-hmm. So in essence, when Nat asked the question, are we relevant today? And ask yourselves, are you personally relevant today in your circle of friends? And if the answer is no, the question is, what's going to make you relevant tomorrow? In street language, are you boring today and are you cool tomorrow? I will take the cool tomorrow any day over being boring. It's just a matter of renewal. It's a part of rejuvenation and regeneration. It's a whole aspect of self-discovery. And I must say, on this journey with Tim, Nat, it has been amazing to rediscover oneself and what one is all about, and you really start to get clarity around why you do what you do. And that translates, I think, to more meaningful results, and I think more impactful results.
Well, I know that we have reached our time, and I would like to just ask you all to conclude briefly. Your first visit to the University of Louisville, I know it's been fantastic, but why don't you just summarize just a couple of things, a couple of takeaways from your first visit with the University of Louisville. I will say, Tim, you know that the president has already signed the University of Louisville, has agreed to be a part of this CEO Action Pact.
Great, that deserves.
And you met today earlier with the mayor, you met with the Congressman John Yarmouth and some others, but a couple of takeaways and then we'll clarify.
Yeah, I think, first of all, it's been a pleasure to be here. And I want to say thank you, Dr. Nat, to you and Ron for making this happen. We planned this a long, long time ago, so I want to thank you. I do want to thank my PwC contingent here, because we have our, you should all raise your hands so people have a sense as to how many. It has been a wonderful day. It's hard to believe it's over. It's gone so quickly. There's so much enthusiasm here. It is incredible. And I will take hard work enthusiasm over intellect any day of the week. And I just think there's so much momentum here of wanting to make a difference. Talking to the mayor, talking to Todd, talking to yourself and the president, there's a desire for action. And I would encourage this group to grab the moment, 7 of your students asked me today in different sessions, how can I make a difference? And in all cases, my answer was, first of all, good for you for wanting to be positive. Because as I shared earlier today in one of the sessions, it is very easy in life to point out problems. It's easy, folks. Like, our world is full of problems. I think every one of those is a big opportunity if you want to make a difference. And in life, we have to choose a path. We can either be someone who points out problems and is destructive, or we can point out problems and say, I'm going to make a difference. And here with the brand of this university, with the excitement and enthusiasm and leadership, you have the ability to make a difference. You've got a student body that is incredibly excited to make a difference. You've got leadership that is incredibly well-versed on the subject and willing to try and fail a bit. I would say go grab it. But I am very optimistic about where this place is going.
Thank you very much for that, Tim. Ron?
I would just echo everything that Tim has said, but I would also challenge you to tell your stories. we all and we each have unique stories that need to be heard. I find it somewhat disappointing that you can work side by side with someone for many years, whether it's a department colleague or department head or student, and we don't slow ourselves down long enough to listen to their stories.
Wonderful.
Tell your story as a university and the fact that you are sitting in a very wonderful place to do some wonderful things. Let the world know that you exist. And I think you're doing a huge disservice to mankind when you don't use your collective power to make a difference in what we're trying to do.
Well, we have a couple of special gifts for you that are only gifts that you will get when you come to a place like the city of Louisville, and of course the University of Louisville. Well, let's just see what's let's see what's inside of these boxes here. And of course we're going to have a reception following this, and you all will be able to, all of us will be able to have a chance to, visit with Tim and Ron privately. But let's just see what they've got.
This shouldn't be, I don't want a pony, I want a horse, or I want bourbon. I want something that had Kentucky all over it.
Something that's special, huh? Is that
Thank
nice?
you very much.
Oh, yes.
Yes, it's tremendous.
Yes.
Yeah. So let's give a round of applause to our guests.
Great.